Hi, I'm Jean Ann Duckworth, and today's word is companionship. I'm building a little series here that I never intended to do, but it kind of worked out that way. I talked about fellowship within the church and how it helps to strengthen relationships within the larger group, any organization, but I'm using the church as the example. It's the one I'm most familiar with. And then I talked about hospitality, that fellowship is the way you build relationships between members and strengthen relationships. But hospitality is the way you make newcomers feel, how you make them feel welcome. You put them at ease, and you begin to bring them into the larger group. Sometimes we take things for granted and we forget that we've been doing it for so long that somebody brand new might not know the routine. Then in the next episode, I talked about compassion and the fact that sometimes we get so caught up in things with the people we know that we forget to show care and concern for other people. The example I gave is that sometimes people will stop attending church. They won't be there for a couple weeks. And then they come to this realization that nobody seems to have noticed they're gone. And if that's the case, nowadays people are so busy. Well, I'm not going to discuss right or wrong on that. It's just a fact. And expecting them to have to get dressed and get the kids ready and go out and go somewhere early on a Sunday morning is actually asking quite a lot. When our daughter was first born, for a year we didn't go to church because Sunday morning was the only day of the week we had together. My husband worked 6 nights a week, and Sunday morning was the only morning we all got up and got to spend time, and it was nice having that family time. To expect us to have to get dressed and ready and a new baby ready, it was just too much to ask. When I was growing up and got to be in junior high and high school, I'd go to church alone. My mother worked 5 days a week. 5 days a week, she had to get up and get dressed and do her hair and put on her hose and all of that stuff and get dressed up. And she just didn't feel like doing it for an extra day. You have to let people know you notice when they're not there and that you miss them and that you're concerned about them without making them feel guilty about it. Today, in this episode, I want to talk to you about companionship. I am a fanatic about small groups. I will be going into it, maybe not in this series, but I'll be talking about it in other programs, and I'll be talking about it in my Life of Simple Joy programs. But I am a fanatic about small groups. Briefly, I feel women need that community, that network, that all of those things, that the fellowship, the hospitality, the compassion, but most importantly, they need that companionship. Within the church, the large group, we develop relationships, but they can be fleeting unless we are able to break it down and have smaller groups of people where they can develop a more intimate relationship. Now, once they do that, I do put a little warning here. I without going on a different path, I'm developing small group material and training and our own small group network. One of the things I am warning about is you never want a small group to be more than, say, 12 members, because after that, it begins to break down into subgroups. And when it's a small group, to have people forming smaller relationships, there's always one or two people that are going to feel left out because that's just not their personality. And you have to watch that in a small group. The small group needs to be the companionship that people are building on. Why is it important? Try though the church or any large organization might, people do slip through the cracks. We do fail to notice that somebody's not there. The small group gives the large organization the opportunity to keep tabs on people. But more importantly, it is this issue of building stronger relationships. It is the issue of spiritual growth and faith development. And it is easier to do that in a smaller group where people can ask questions, where they can talk to one another, where they can share concerns that they might not share in the larger group. The early church, when you read Acts, they would have these meetings and 2,000-3,000 people would accept Christ all at one time. Well, it's fabulous. But if you just kept the group, the organization at that, people would get lost. I know I would feel overwhelmed. Somebody said to me one time they were surprised I joined a sorority. But when I started my freshman year of college, I went to a commuter college. There weren't dorms. You went home. It was a 4-year university, but at the time they didn't have dorms. You didn't live on campus. I knew if I didn't get involved in some kind of organization, I would go to class, I would go home, and I wouldn't develop any relationships. I'd have no companionship, and I would, it would be hard. I knew it was going to be hard for me if that happened, but I knew it would be easy for me to not build any relationships otherwise. So I joined a sorority, and it made all the difference in the world. When you read about the early church, they were bringing all these people in, but then they broke down into smaller groups. They were meeting in homes, and let's face it, I don't know anybody's home that can hold 3,000. Well, I guess there's some. I live in, Orange County, but near LA County, and I'm sure there are homes up there where outside they could have 3,000 people. But most homes at the time of the early church, you're talking small groups. Mark's mother would have people over to her house because she had a larger home and she could have a larger group. But even then, we're not talking 2,000 people. We're talking, maybe 50, possibly 100. But they started breaking down into smaller groups and meeting in smaller groups. And I think that while the large meetings were building the church, these smaller groups is what were maintaining the church. Without the small groups, they would have lost members. People would have joined, and then they wouldn't have had any growth or fulfillment after that, and they would have left. That companionship, that personal connection, that relationship building within a large organization through a smaller group is what maintains the larger organization, in the same way that cells make up the human body. The body is the church, but you have to have those smaller parts in order to make the larger being. Well, that made sense in my head. I hope it made sense as it came out. The biggest thing is that it takes, you have to break the large organization down into smaller parts in order to build companionship. And when you build companionship and relationships among the people, it sustains the large organization. I'm Jean Ann Duckworth, and today's word is companionship.